Gender violence: understanding, resisting, ending the silence. This video training module has been designed and prepared by the Prajnya Trust for the M.O.P College for Women Finishing School program in February 2024. In this module, you will learn to understand what gender violence is, to understand how to recognize and identify violence when it occurs on the streets, at home, or at work, to learn how we can respond to violence and harassment, to begin to understand our rights and the protection Indian law offers us. What is gender violence? When one experiences violence in a certain way because one is a woman, girl, boy, man, transgender person, that is gender violence. Sexual violence is gender violence, and that includes rape, date rape, marital rape, child sexual abuse, and incestuous abuse, among others. Gender violence expresses the power that one person has or wishes to have over another. Gender violence can take any form: stalking, obscene calls, sexual harassment at the workplace, what we euphemistically call eve teasing, are all gender violence. From the time we are born until our death, the possibility of gender violence is ever present. From sex-selective abortion, which harms unborn female fetuses, to elder abuse, women and girls especially learn to build their lives around preventing and minimizing violence. Here are some overt forms of violence. Others are structural, like daily discrimination in the matter of nutrition, health care, or different wages. Verbal and emotional abuse are also violence. How common is gender violence? Why should we be thinking about it? We bring you some data. 1 in 3 women watching this video has or will experience violence in their lifetime. Moreover, only 1 in 4 of those women will tell anyone about it. The silence is pervasive, as is violence. We know too that gender violence is made more likely and more intense by other intersectional realities in a person's life. By intersectional realities, we mean other dimensions of who we are in society. Some of these intersecting realities are mapped on this graphic: class, caste, community, religion, region, disability, rural or urban location, age, educational level. Every kind of social marginalization reinforces a person's vulnerability to gender violence, although violence can be and is perpetrated across every one of these lines. As we say, gender violence and sexual and gender-based violence are pervasive. Gender violence can be physical, such as beating your wife; sexual, such as molestation and rape; verbal, making disparaging comments; emotional or psychological, like isolating a woman from her family; and also financial, dowry or taking away someone's bank card. Why does gender violence happen? We live in a patriarchal society that prioritizes one gender, male, over others, and some forms of being male over others. Unequal social arrangements create a climate where those placed at the top of the hierarchy have a sense of entitlement to have their way all the time. This is reinforced by the impunity they enjoy. That is, they can get away with small things like grabbing the TV remote and watching what they want or eating the last idli, and they can also get away with harassing a girl at the bus stop or throwing hot rice at their wife or intimidating someone at work. Patriarchy enables and even nurtures a culture of violence where gender violence is an accepted way of enforcing gender codes and roles and of reinforcing the hierarchy. People justify violence in many ways. He is so tired, he has problems at work, he is in pain, she's a bad cook, the girl wore a skirt, she should not have talked back, but violence is never justified. Violence is never justified. Violence is never justified. Violence is never justified. Violence is not our fate. As human beings, we have a right to live without violence or the threat of violence. This entitlement is enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which establishes our equal rights, including the right to life, liberty, and security of person. It is also established by the Constitution of India, which clearly lists as fundamental rights the right to equality, prohibition of discrimination, equality of opportunity, prohibition of traffic in human beings and forced labor, and crucially, that no one shall be deprived of life or personal liberty except legally. In the next part of this module, we will place the spotlight on four kinds of gender violence: street sexual harassment, workplace sexual harassment, dowry, and domestic violence. Street sexual harassment. Step out of your home and you are looking over your shoulder, out of the corner of your eye, walking really fast. Is someone following me? Is someone watching me? What films show as romance is the very scary reality of street sexual harassment. This is a kind of violence that keeps girls from further studies or finding a job or going out to beaches and parks and movies. When we ignore street sexual harassment or pretend it is not violence but something playful or innocent, we grant predators permission to roam and lock up the innocent in the name of protection. What are the things that constitute street sexual harassment? These are the responses that blank noise received. Anything that makes you feel ashamed, humiliated, or frightened is harassment. Sexual harassment is not about what the perpetrator intends, but about how the person at the receiving end feels. I repeat, anything that makes you feel ashamed, humiliated, or frightened is harassment. Sexual harassment is not about what the perpetrator intends, but about how the person at the receiving end feels. Why take sexual harassment seriously? Street sexual harassment is a serious offense with grave life altering consequences. We need to treat it as a form of violence and coercion and not as an expression of youthful exuberance or of romantic attraction. How can I respond to street sexual harassment? First of all, keep yourself safe. If you think you are safe, you can respond in several ways. You can ignore the harassment and walk away. You directly address the harasser and say no loudly and clearly. You can seek the help of those around you. You can talk to someone afterwards. You can file a police complaint. You can get together a group and do neighborhood safety audits and share the findings with your local government office. Well, and you can get in touch with Prajnya and ask us how to do this. You do not have to put up with street sexual harassment. The law is on our side. You can go to the police and file a complaint either under sections of the Indian Penal Code or under the Tamil Nadu Prohibition of Harassment of Women Act of 2002. Workplace sexual harassment. Before we consider what workplace sexual harassment is, let us stop and look at what a workplace could be in 2024. A place where you work in person, in hybrid mode, or remotely, any mode of transportation provided by your employer or contracting organizations, any medium of work communication. All of these are a workplace. The International Labour Organization defines workplace sexual harassment in this way. Sexual harassment refers to unwelcome sexual advances or verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature which has the effect of unreasonably interfering with the individual's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, abusive, or offensive working environment. To paraphrase, workplace sexual harassment is any unwelcome words or actions of a sexual nature directed at a person by an employee or an employer, irrespective of hierarchies within the organization. Sexual harassment is not about what the perpetrator intends, but about how the person at the receiving end feels. Workplace sexual harassment typically takes two forms. It could be quid pro quo, do something for me and I will do something for you. While this is commonly depicted in serials and movies, it is more common to find a hostile working environment. When people constantly criticize or gossip or subject a person to abusive speech and sexual comments and propositions, over time they create a hostile working environment. This is easy to do but very hard to complain about and prove. There is not one kind of behavior that constitutes sexual harassment at the workplace. Here are some of the many behaviors that can be the basis of a sexual harassment complaint. We said this earlier and it is worth repeating. Anything that makes you feel ashamed, humiliated, or frightened is harassment. Sexual harassment is not about what the perpetrator intends, but about how the person at the receiving end feels. The law protects us from workplace sexual harassment. In 1997, the Supreme Court held employers legally responsible for the safety of women working in their organizations. In 2013, the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act made it compulsory for every organization to have a policy that prohibits sexual harassment, an internal committee that must be led by a woman with majority women members, information about the internal committee, its members, and how to complain available to employees, time-bound response to complaints, awareness programs. The law requires annual reporting. For those whose work is outside of organizations, it requires district administrators to set up a local committee to hear complaints. Remember, most organizations that you will work with must adopt a workplace sexual harassment prevention policy, communicate the policy, enforce the policy, and it is your right to ask and know whether your future employer has a policy and committee in place. Practice this question when you prepare for an interview. Does your organization have a workplace sexual harassment policy? Does your organization have a workplace sexual harassment policy? Does your organization have a workplace sexual harassment policy? How can you respond to workplace sexual harassment? You can recognize and acknowledge it as sexual harassment rather than ignore it. You can let the harasser know that you think their behavior is harassment and you will not be silent. For this, you can try to have a witness. You can document what happens. You can talk to others. You can file a formal complaint. Dowry. Are you wondering why we are speaking about dowry? The practice of giving and taking dowry essentially says a woman's own value is not enough and must be enhanced with money, gold, or consumer goods like refrigerators or motorcycles. It expresses male child preference and devalues women. Having to provide for dowry creates a female infanticide culture and traps families in debt. In 1961, India passed a law banning the giving and taking of dowry. This was reinforced in 1986 by an IPC provision on dowry death. If a woman dies mysteriously within 7 years of marriage and it is shown that she was harassed for dowry, the penalty for her dowry death can be 7 years to life imprisonment. Domestic violence. Under Indian law, domestic violence is any violence between members of a household, married couple, live-in partners, dating partners, others in the household, so it includes elder abuse and can include marital rape. Domestic violence takes many forms: physical, sexual, verbal, emotional, and economic abuse. Domestic violence is a learned behavior, not a mental illness. Domestic violence is not caused by anger, stress, or alcohol, drugs. These are only excuses for violent behavior. There are no circumstances in which domestic violence is justified. Perpetrators are responsible for their own behavior. And you should know there are services available for supporting victims. The same rules apply to all relationships, within and outside marriage, across sexual orientations and identities. Equality and consent are central to a healthy relationship. How can you respond to domestic violence? Recognize the behavior to be violence or abuse. Speak about it to someone. Learn about support services around you. There are government services like protection officers, one-stop centers, and social welfare departments. Government hospitals and police can also help. You can also go to NGOs. There are shelters and helplines. The fourth thing you can do is to make a basic safety plan. Who can I phone? Where can I go quickly? Can I set money aside? Which documents should I take with me? Who will help me? The Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005 defines domestic violence broadly, and it applies to all relationships in a household. It sets up a support system for women to access shelter, protection, maintenance, residential rights, and legal aid. IPC 498A makes cruelty by the husband and his family punishable by imprisonment. What can you or I do about gender-based violence? We can talk about violence. We can stop thinking it's okay to ignore it. We can stop feeling like it's our fault or because of something we did or said or wore. We can become aware of our rights and of laws. We can learn about and share information about victim support and legal aid services. We can become aware of our environment, stay alert to threats around us. We can step in to help someone else who experiences gender violence. We can survive violence, and we can certainly stand by alert to help others. When people ask what they can do, we share with them 4 ways they can respond as witnesses to violence, abuse, or harassment, or even possible violence, abuse, or harassment. First, we can directly intervene to stop the abuse. Just step in between abuser and victim. That is difficult for most of us. So the second possibility is to distract the abuser in some way. You could cause some disturbance or disruption, or call out something about the bus is coming, or what was that, an earthquake, or what time is it? If you are also unsure of the situation and feeling uncertain on your own, you can reach out to others around you to help. That is the third way. Finally, even if you cannot do any of these things, you can reach out to the affected person and see if they need some help. Water or tea, a quiet place to recover. Don't lecture. Don't keep talking, but let them know that if they make a complaint, you will be a witness. Violence is never justified. None of us needs to put up with violence. Not when it happens to us, not when it happens to someone else. You don't have to be a superhero to end violence. It just takes you as you are. Just say no to violence everywhere, every day. Thank you for your attention. You can visit our website and also connect with us on social media. If you would like to intern or volunteer with us, please write us an email introducing yourself and expressing your interest. Our coordinates are on the screen.